From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
I have great confidence in President Calderon's administration applying the law enforcement techniques that are necessary to curb the power of the cartels, but doing so in a way that's consistent with human rights.
President Obama wraps up a two-day visit to Mexico for talks with Mexican President Calderon and Canadian Prime Minister Harper. The so-called Three Amigos Summit covered Mexico's drug war, trade, immigration reform, the crisis in Honduras, and the swine flu outbreak. We'll get analysis. Then at least 10 people have been killed in another U.S. drone attack in northwest Pakistan. We'll speak with a former Army captain who led a platoon of Army Rangers inside Iraq and Afghanistan. He's calling for a moratorium on drone strikes. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Burmese pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi has been sentenced to an additional 18 months of house arrest after a controversial trial. Suu Kyi has already spent 14 of the past 20 years in detention under Burma's military junta. The trials brought international condemnation, with critics accusing Burma's military government of trying to keep Suu Kyi out of next year's planned multi-party elections. The Nobel Peace Prize winner was found guilty of violating an internal security law. The charges stem from a mysterious incident in which an American, John Yetta, swam uninvited to her lakeside home in May and stayed there for 2 days in violation of the terms of her house arrest. In a separate trial, Yetta was sentenced to 7 years hard labor. Jared Genser, a lawyer who represents Suu Kyi overseas, said, quote, "She's not being imprisoned because an American swam to her home, but because she's viewed as a strong threat to the legitimacy of this regime and its plans for next year's elections." President Barack Obama addressed the political crisis in Honduras during a news conference Monday in Mexico alongside the leaders of Mexico and Canada. Obama said it was hypocritical for critics of Washington's response to the coup to demand a more forceful U.S. role in returning the democratically elected President Manuel Zelaya to power.
The same critics who say that the United States has not intervened enough in Honduras are the same people who say that we're always intervening and Yankees need to get out of Latin America. You can't have it both ways. If these critics think that it's appropriate for us to suddenly act in ways that in every other context they consider inappropriate, then I think what that indicates is that maybe there's some hypocrisy involved in their approach to U.S. Latin America relations that certainly is not going to guide my administration's policies.
While President Obama spoke in Mexico, thousands marched to the UN headquarters in the Honduran capital of Tegucigalpa, calling for the return of the ousted president, Zelaya. Meanwhile, the Union of South American Nations announced Monday it will not recognize any leader elected while Honduras's coup-installed regime is in power. Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton arrived in the Democratic Republic of Congo Monday and called on the Congolese government to do more to stamp out rape. Clinton said women can no longer be used as weapons of war. Earlier today, Clinton arrived in the eastern Congolese city of Goma, capital of North Kivu province, which aid groups say is the most dangerous place on earth for women and children. Clinton is scheduled to have a private meeting with women who've suffered rape and other atrocities. About 180 nations met for UN climate talks Monday to prepare for the UN Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen in December. The head of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Ivo de Boer, said time is running out.
Well, as you know, we have just over 115 days left until Copenhagen, about 5 weeks of negotiating time. We have a very complicated text on the table, and the challenge for this session is going to be to narrow that text down and really try and identify the core elements of a Copenhagen agreement.
In Pakistan, at least 10 people have died after a U.S. drone hit an insurgent camp in South Waziristan near the Afghan border. The area is the stronghold of Pakistani Taliban leader Baitullah Masood, who's believed to have been killed in another U.S. drone strike last week. The kidnapped head of a charity helping children in Chechnya was found dead of gunshot wounds in her car Tuesday, along with her murdered husband. Armed men seized Zarima Sadyulalieva and her husband, Alek Jabrelov, from the office of the Save the Generations charity in the regional capital, Grozny. The Save the Generations charity that Sadyulalieva headed provides medical and psychological help to young people who've suffered as a result of violence in Chechnya, including children who lost limbs during the region's separatist wars. The murders come 1 month after leading Chechen rights activist Natalia Estemirova was kidnapped and killed by unknown assailants. Partial election results show that the Fatah faction of Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas has voted to overhaul its top leaders in its first election in 2 decades. New members of Fatah's Central Committee include the popular jailed leader Marwan Barghouti and Mohammed Dahlan, who served as head of security in the Gaza Strip for Yasser Arafat. Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa was sworn in for a second term Monday. The inauguration fell on the same day as Ecuador's bicentennial celebration. On the first day of his new term, Correa called for the Union of South American Nations, or UNASUR, to negotiate a regional monetary agreement and to move ahead with establishing a new multilateral lending agency.
Facing this global crisis that we are living through, which is one of the most serious crises of the capitalist system, we have to find profound solutions, solutions that are not going to be found within the collapsing system. We have to construct creative, revolutionary answers in order to build something new, something better.
Here in the United States, prison watchdog groups are blaming Saturday's prison riot in California on overcrowding. 200 prisoners were injured, including over 50 seriously, during a 4-hour riot at the California Institution for Men in Chino. The prison was designed to hold 3,000 men, but the state was housing nearly twice that number. For years, California officials have ignored warnings about prison overcrowding. 2 years ago, a prison expert warned that the prison in Chino was, quote, a serious disturbance waiting to happen. Some state prisons in California are at nearly 300% of intended capacity. The wealthy county of Westchester, New York, has agreed to spend $60 million to build at least 750 affordable housing units in overwhelmingly white communities and to market that housing to minority tenants and buyers. The landmark desegregation agreement settles a lawsuit filed by the Anti-Discrimination Center. Craig Gurian of the center said, quote, this settlement means that Westchester can no longer hide from the ugly reality of continuing residential segregation. FBI agents raided the homicide division of the New Orleans Police Department last week as part of a federal probe into a deadly bridge shooting in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. FBI agents seized 2 computers and case files from the department during a search of the office. The FBI is investigating officers involved in the September 4, 2005 shootings on the Danziger Bridge that killed 2 men and injured 4. And Eunice Kennedy Shriver has died at the age of 88. She was the founder of the Special Olympics and was a member of one of the most prominent American political families of the 20th century. Her brothers included President John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Senator Edward Kennedy. Her daughter Maria is married to California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. And those are some of the headlines